Liz, great to have you on the show. I can see the blue sky behind you. I can see the sun on the field. Is this becoming a bit of a worry?
Yes, it's really very, very concerning.
It is welcome to have this lovely, dry and warm weather after such a terrible winter where we were relentlessly hit with huge amounts of rain. But if you're a farmer, actually, this dry weather is becoming a real problem. A lot of us couldn't manage to get our crops in the ground last autumn because of the wet weather. Those that we did get in have rotted. So then we were left to plant crops this spring. And now we don't have enough rain. And so the crops that have germinated are dying, and the ones that haven't germinated haven't been able to germinate because it's too dry. If they do germinate, there's no rain in sight. And this is pretty scary. Additionally, for those of us with livestock, it means that the grass isn't growing. We obviously grow grass for them to eat out in the fields in the summer, but we also grow grass that which we cut for silage and hay. The crops we grow are for straw, and these things are all under threat, which means that we could be looking at a situation next winter of not having enough food. Equally, we might not have enough grass over the summer if things continue to be as bleak as they are. Anyway, I spoke to Andrew Marr on LBC about this.
50. You must have noticed week after week, day after glorious day, bright sunshine, and after such a dismal winter, thank the Lord. But there's been very, very little rain, one of the driest springs for a very long time. Wilting gardens are one thing, but what does this mean for British agriculture? How urgent is the need for rain? Let's talk now to Liz Webster, founder of Save British Farming, and herself a farmer in Wiltshire. Liz, great to have you on the show. I can see the blue sky behind you. I can see the sun on the field. Is this becoming a bit of a worry?
Yes, it's really very, very concerning. Yeah, we are seriously worried, yeah. And there's no sign of rain in sight where we are for the next 10 days or so.
And I gather the driest spring since the 1960s. So what kinds of crops, what kinds of farmers are affected first? Who's in the most trouble, if I can put it that way?
Well, there has been a postcode lottery with the rain. So, you know, in Gloucestershire on Monday, they had an absolute downpour in certain areas. So a lot of it is really more to do with whether you've been lucky and bagged, a downpour of rain. But ultimately, it is, a dire situation, unless, you've diversified into holiday camps, or you've got a solar farm, or you've decided to grow flowers, in SFI. So, but even they are obviously not growing either. So it is seriously worrying. And for some of us in particular dry spots, it is a real concern, because everything that we've managed to drill early is now at risk of not growing without rain.
And presumably it's some of the big arable crops, the maize and the wheat and the barley and so forth, that will be particularly affected. Is this experience, do you think, driving more and more farmers to give up those big crops?
Well, look, we've had the politics against us. The reason we joined the European Union was to ensure that we were protected against events like this, weather events, or against war. And we've had policy driving us into coming out of growing food. So as I said, some farmers are okay. Though we've kept producing food, we've got cattle here, but we've got to feed those cattle. And there's massive problems, if we don't have enough feed. And we don't really have any guaranteed supply. China, for instance, has been planning its food supplies for the next century. And we have been tearing apart our trade policy, and we don't have an agriculture policy which includes food production. It's all about the environment. Food is no longer a public good. So that scares me. I'm the child of I'm a grandchild of someone who fed the RAF, who was a cook in India and in the war. And, I'm acutely aware of the need for food, because I witnessed that famine over there through my grandfather's stories. And I've always been significantly worried about Brexit destroying our food system, But climate change now is showing you why. We had a winter, we were underwater all winter here. Many farmers couldn't drill their autumn crops, which would be hardier against this dry spell now. You've got seeds that have gone in the ground and there's no water for germination, or they've just germinated and then they're suffering. And this is a massive problem because we've got cattle to feed as well as humans to feed.
Liz, I can see it's beautiful there. I also know it's very, very hard out there. So our very best wishes. I'm sure people from Whitehall will be listening to what you say. Let's hope so anyway. But thank you.
It's often not really understood why food is so essential, because for years we have had such an enormous amount of variety and choice and abundance of food being in the European Union. But we have come out of there. We don't have a guaranteed supply anymore. And not only that, we have a government, we had successive governments that believe that we can survive on imports. And to an extent, 10 years ago, when there wasn't so much trouble in the world, that might have been true. But we've only heard in the last few days, Vladimir Putin is amassing troops on the border of Finland. So war is looking more likely with NATO. And we know that from the last war, when Hitler invaded Poland, we were suitably unprepared for food supplies. Being an island nation, we could get imports, but they were being targeted by the Germans. And that gave us terrible food shortages and food rationing. So it's going to be worse if that happens now, because we don't have an empire to guarantee imports from. And we are very, very vulnerable because there's been no food production plan, and there's been absolute disregard for our farmers and where our food comes from. People just assume it grows in the supermarket. But it is something that I have been acutely aware of and awake to, because, as I said in the interview with Andrew Marr, my grandfather was a cook in the RAF, and he talked endlessly about the famine and the food shortages. I still have his cooking manual and what it was like in India during that time. India starved so we could eat. Churchill redirected wheat from India to here to feed us, and they had a famine. If we do end up in a full-blown war, we are in a very vulnerable place. Having decided to leave the trading bloc in Europe, we haven't had a campaign to even get the public behind rejoining. There's this vague reset which gives all of the power to Europe as well, because we're cherry picking still. I mean, it couldn't be any worse from my perspective. If I was Prime Minister, as I've said several times, the first thing I would do would be to rejoin the European Union.
Hope you enjoyed the video. Do comment below, let me know what you think. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing.